like the way that C.S. Lewis put it. He said, there is no neutral ground in all of the universe. Every square inch, every split second is claimed by God and counterclaimed by Satan. The founders of the government school system, they knew that there was no such thing as a neutral education. Even though they sold it to the American public that way, they knew exactly what they were doing. So they were basically like, we're not going to convince the older generation of Christians to give up their faith. But if we can get the kids before they grow into strong, firm Christians, that's how we're going to turn the tide of Christianity in this country.
Wow.
They lay it all out. Look it up. The Humanist Manifesto, 1933. No matter what education you give your kids, it's going to cost you something. Here's the challenge, I would say. If the true cost of a free education in the government school system is your child's identity in this life and maybe possibly their eternity in the next life, like, is that not worth your time and or your money?
Absolutely.
Well, hey, welcome back. Thank you for joining us for another conversation. Kendra's back. As you can see, we have a third co-host here with us, Sage. And so we do apologize in advance for any of the grunting or burping or other noises that you might hear, yes. Especially for our audio-only listeners. But there's really no other way to do it. This is life, and we are sharing our life with you. So just please bear with us as we go and as he grows.
Yes.
But to start things off, I want to kind of paint a picture for you, and then we'll get into what we're talking about here today. But let's say a group of very rich, very influential businessmen came in and they took control of every church building in the country. They took control of your church building. And it was kind of confusing a little bit what they were all about. And from the very beginning, they said, okay, during the week, we're going to use all of these buildings to basically be community resources, right? We're going to feed the hungry. We're going to house the homeless. We're going to clothe people that need it. We're just going to be an outreach place of, for the community, doing good things to bring the community together and serve those that need to be served, right? Then on Sunday, they will install this leader that basically replaces your pastor, and they'll invite everyone from the community, no matter what church you used to go to, no matter what religion you claim to be from. We're all going to come together into these houses of worship or whatever they might call them, and basically just focus on love and unity and doing good things and growing together. Basically nothing that would cause friction, nothing that would be difficult to talk about.
Divisive.
Nothing that would be divisive, right? We're just going to focus on everything that we're pretty sure everyone is going to say, this is good, this is right, yes, we should all do this. Not allowed to talk about God. Don't bring your Bible. We're going to, maybe worship whatever this higher power is, but it's really going to be focused on just love and unity, right? Would that be a church that you would continue to go to? They're not forcing you to come there. You would be going of your own free will. Is it a church that you would continue to go to? Hopefully you would say no. Hopefully you would figure out a different option. But I can say pretty confidently that I think that millions of Christians would continue to go there. And they would come up with all kinds of reasons to justify it. Well, they really are doing a lot of good in our community.
Right.
Or, well, it's just where I've always gone, and I just don't have the time to figure anything else out. It's just super convenient for me. Whatever those excuses are.
Well, I can read the Bible at my house on my own.
I'll just do it on my own, in my own time, at home, whenever I can fit it in. So me and Jesus are good. And this is also good, right? And eventually what would happen, because if you remove God from church, if you remove God from your life in those ways, you can't separate God and morality. You can't separate God from what you do in everyday life. So eventually, it might take a generation, 2 generations, I don't know, but eventually Christians would no longer be Christian. they would be something else. I don't know what necessarily you would name them, but they wouldn't be Christian anymore, because that's not what they're following. That's not what they're talking about. That's not who they're putting themselves around. Right. And the reason that I can say so confidently that millions of people would choose to continue to go to a church like that is because that's exactly what we've done with our students and our kids over the last several generations with school.
Ooh.
That is the government school system. That's the public school system. Men from the government came in and presented this system to Christian families that was neutral, that was very convenient. And what happened was Christians just continued to go along with it. And so now we have entire generations that don't really know God because they've been trained to not even think about him.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Schools used to be Christian. Schools used to have Bibles. They used to have prayer. They used to teach things from a Christian worldview. But slowly, and we'll get into the history of it in a little bit, but slowly God was removed. So when you remove God from schools, you're removing God from the minds and the hearts of kids. What are you going to eventually end up with? Maybe people that are moral, but not people that are godly. Right. It doesn't work that way. And so listen, first, because I've taken heat over this over the years, I'm not disparaging Christians from being teachers. Like, if you feel like God called you into the public school system to be a teacher, to be an administrator, praise God. We need good Christian people going after Christian values in every branch of the government to shift things back to what our country once was. So go and do that missions work if you feel like that's where God has called you to. I'm not talking about adults working for any part of the government system. I'm talking about Christian families willingly sending their kids into this system and then being confused whenever that system gives them back and they're not Christians anymore, which is what's happening, right? But I will say this: if you are a Christian in that system because you feel like you've been called by God to be on a mission there, then be on a mission there. Like, people should absolutely know you as a Christian that stands on the Word of God, that loves Jesus. If they only know you as a really nice person, as a really kind person, that's just part of the problem. Yeah. Right?
That shouldn't be your main identity.
No, that can't be. But so here's the reality. Matthew 12:30. There is no neutral with God. There's no gray area. We can't sit on the fence. Jesus said, you're for me or you're against me. Those are the two options. There's no neutrality. We can't be religiously neutral despite this system that we've been sold. It's not actually that way. I like the way that C.S. Lewis put it. He said, there is no neutral ground in all of the universe. Every square inch, every split second is claimed by God and counterclaimed by Satan.
Oh, so how did we get here?
Yeah. So we can talk about the history. I mean, maybe you're unaware of this, but the founders of the government school system, they knew that there was no such thing as a neutral education. Even though they sold it to the American public that way, they knew exactly what they were doing. And, there's a lot of people, I think, with a lot of good intentions, kind of like that story that I painted in the beginning. Well, they're doing a lot of good things, right? They're doing a lot of moral things. And they're just deceived. There's a lot of people that are just deceived. But the people that actually designed this system were not deceived at all. They had a plan, they had an agenda, and they absolutely executed it. So let me give you a history lesson real quick. In 1635 was about whenever they started to make community schools. 200 or so years later, in the 1800s, there was a man named Horace Mann. He's considered actually the father of American education. And he basically argued that, well, since taxpayer dollars, since the American public is funding these community schools, then we really need to separate them from Christianity. We got to separate them from any type of religious affiliation. And like any good manipulator does, man talked out of both sides of his mouth. If you read a lot of the quotes from him, so the people that he knew that were for him, he expressed openly his agenda. We need to get rid of Christianity, but to the general, mostly Christian public, basically what he says was, hey, listen, we need to do this, but we're going to continue to teach all of the good things, all of the morals. We're going to teach them still to be good people. And let's be honest, you can't really be good without also having those things come from the Bible. So we're still going to be teaching them all the same things. We're just not going to use the word God. Is that all right? And so he convinced all of these people, basically, they didn't want to fight. And so they were like, yeah, I guess. I mean, as long as they're still learning all of the same things, I guess that's okay. And so by 1918, pretty much every school in the nation had adopted this neutral stance. Now, they still had the Bible there. They still had prayer there, but they were moving away from teaching out of it. Okay. Right? It's still there because most people were Christian and had kind of been sold on this idea of neutrality, whatever. But it only took 15 years. By 1933, the enemy took the next step, because that's the way that the enemy works, right? He takes a little bit of ground and a little bit more and then a little bit more. It doesn't stop unless someone stands up and stands firm and stops him from taking more ground. So by 1933, what was called the Humanist Manifesto was written down. And so this was a group of educators, administrators, and they essentially wrote down what their agenda was. They wanted to convert this mostly Christian nation into a humanist nation. That's why it was called the Humanist Manifesto. And the way that they wanted to do that was by indoctrinating kids in the school system. They were basically like, we're not going to convince the older generation of Christians to give up their faith. But if we can get the kids, before they grow into strong, firm Christians, that's how we're going to turn the tide of Christianity in this country.
Wow.
They lay it all out. Look it up. The Humanist Manifesto, 1933. So then less than 30 years later, and remember, most of these powerful people were in the American education system. So not only did they have the agenda, they also had the means to steer policy and all of the other things that they needed to steer. So less than 30 years later, 1961, the humanists had succeeded in removing prayer from public school. Now we're not praying anymore, right? Again, one more step. 1962, the very next year, they expanded that same ruling in the courts to remove the Bible. So in less than 30 years, they said what the agenda was. We're going to remove Christianity, starting with the kids. And in less than 30 years, they took prayer, they took the Bible, they had taken the name God out of the school system.
Wow.
And really, if you think about it, 1962 is not that long ago.
No.
And so when we think about, man, how did we fall so far as a country built on God 100 years ago, 150 years ago? How did we get here? This is how.
Yeah, seriously.
Generations of kids were taught basically that God doesn't exist on morally neutral grounds, right? But once again, you can't remove God and say, well, we're just going to be moral people.
No.
God says that it doesn't work that way.
Right. So essentially, since the early 60s, we've given the enemy 15,000 hours of our kids' lives.
Yeah.
With public school, because that's how many hours it is from K to 12.
Yeah, 15,000 hours. And I've heard it said basically it takes 10,000 hours of something to become an expert. So we're literally giving, an expert and a half status to this is how you ignore God.
Wow.
This is how you learn all of these things, but remove God from your life. That's what they're learning, right? And one other thing that I find absolutely incredulous. So 1960s, 61 and 62 is when prayer and the Bible were removed. 1961 is the same year that U.S. courts also declared and recognized humanism as an official religion.
Wow.
And still today, there are humanist churches, there are humanist doctrines. So literally the morally, religiously neutral system that we send our kids into in the public school system here is literally a humanist system, which is also a religion that's recognized by the United States government. Wow. Tell me that's not crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy.
We removed the religion of Christianity and we installed the religion of humanism.
Wow.
They don't talk about it in that wording,
right,
obviously, because the enemy's so slick. But if you look at it, that's exactly what it is. And also they removed civics classes right in the 1960s too. Oh. So we're not going to teach you the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights and all of these other things that talk about how we founded our nation on God.
Right.
It was just another way that, hey, we're gonna remove this. And obviously there's all kinds of other bad things that have happened from not teaching people their rights and not teaching people how this country was founded.
How to be an American and be proud of being an American.
Right. And to be firm on the word of God.
Right.
Right. It's crazy. But so listen, just to prove it, I've got some quotes here from some of these leaders who were involved in this humanist takeover. Our schools may not teach Johnny to read properly, but the fact that Johnny is in school until he is 16, now obviously 18, tends to lean towards the elimination of religious superstition. It's from a man named Paul Blanchard. Charles F. Potter said this. He's known as the architect of the modern education system. So he would have worked fairly closely with the ideals that Horace Mann put out there. He said, education is a most powerful ally of humanism. And listen to this, every American school is a school of humanism. What can a theistic Sunday schools meeting for an hour once a week and teaching only a fraction of the children do to stem the tide of the 5-day program of humanistic teaching?
Wow.
They put it right out there.
It's like blatant indoctrination. Like, this is what we're doing.
This is what we're going to do to your kids.
Right.
And then the last one, this was from a guy named John Dunphy from a letter that was called the Humanist Essay. It was kind of a follow-up. I forget when it was written. It was written quite a bit after the Humanist Manifesto, but it was still along, the lines of what are we doing as a humanist church, a humanist religion, basically. He said, the battle for humankind's future must be waged and won in the public school classroom by teachers who correctly perceive their role as proselytizers of a new faith. Are you catching this? They're saying we're installing priests of our religion as teachers in the classroom.
Right.
He says, a religion of humanity, utilizing a classroom instead of a pulpit to carry humanist values into wherever they teach.
Wow.
They put it right out there for anyone that wanted to pay attention. And yet, generations of Christian families said, it's okay, take my kids. And then we're confused as to why we're here.
Yeah.
And so make no mistake, the humanist takeover absolutely was successful in exactly what they planned to do and told everyone that they were going to do. So several studies over the last 10 years have shown that less than 1%, this is crazy and so sad, less than 1% of young adults in America have a biblical worldview.
Wow. They
don't even know what the Bible teaches. Even if they claim to be Christian, less than 1%. And depending on the study, there's various studies, but they come back with a number anywhere between 75 to 90% of kids that are raised in Christian homes leave the Christian faith by the time that they're 30 years old. Why? Because they've been taught their whole life to ignore God. They've been taught a different religion, the religion of humanism. It's crazy. So we essentially are sending these kids into a humanist church for 13 years. What other outcome can anyone expect other than for them to come out of that system as a humanist?
Right. Yeah.
There is no other outcome. There is no other answer. here's the thing. The creator of this world, the God of the universe, told us that knowledge begins with a fear of the Lord, that understanding comes from knowing the Holy One. That's Proverbs 9:10. He's saying there is no knowledge without me in it. If you remove God, then everything else is going to crumble. So over the last 65-ish years, we've removed God and still called what we're doing education. God says that's illegitimate. That's not learning. That's not knowledge. That's not understanding. That's going to crumble. Whether it's just simply in your life or the whole system is going to crumble, that's not going to work. And so especially over the last 20 years, I mean, you can look and you can see that they've not really even been providing an adequate education, even from their own standards, even from a secular standard, even from a humanist standard. They're failing our kids. So over 1/3, especially over COVID, like things got really bad. And finally, some people started to wake up. And I do feel like we're going in a different direction as a country. God is stirring things. But over the last 20 years, now over 1/3 of our public school students are behind at least one entire grade level. And there was a new study that just came out last week where a neuroscientist studied thousands of students in Generation Z. And he had this to say. He said, they underperformed on every cognitive measure, from basic attention to memory, to literacy, to numeracy, to executive function, and general IQ. He said Gen Z is the first generation ever in America to be dumber than their parents. His words, not mine. But It's true.
And he blamed most of that decline on screen addictions, right?
He did. Yeah, it was coming from the perspective of like, this is why we have to get our kids off of screens. It's not funny, but it kind of goes right hand in hand with the last conversation that we had talking about screens. They are a drug. They're an epidemic, and screens and screen addiction absolutely has a part to play in all of this underperformance. Because most of the kids, whenever they realized that these were the results, they didn't even care. They're so apathetic, and I think that's mostly what kind of comes back to the screens because we're so distracted and all of this other things. But from our perspective, the main reason would be because God is not present.
Yes.
If you teach people to ignore God, there is no understanding, there is no learning, there is none of these other things that Scripture says are rooted in Jesus.
There's also not going to be any conviction in screens and other things that are pulling you away from him and from those good things.
Yeah, no conviction to get back on the right path at all. And so, I mean, we have generations now who basically are like, why can't I just ask Google or Chat GPT? Like, why do I even need to learn? This is a waste of time. Because they don't understand the value, because we don't understand the value of education from God's perspective, right? God has a reason for education. It is to know who you are. It is to go after the things that he has planned and purposed for you. And it is to spread his name. Like, if we're not rooted in the reason for being educated, if we don't understand the reasons that God gave us a brain to function and understand logic and understand math and all of these things that God does want us to know, if we don't understand the purpose of it because we've removed God from it, I completely understand why they're like, why do I need to learn? I can just ask a computer.
Yeah. Really, what's the point of anything at that point, which is where they're at?
What's the point of anything? What's the point of life if you remove God? There really isn't one.
Right.
And this is not necessarily just a problem in the U.S., but obviously this is where we live, so it's, close to our hearts, and we want our country to be strong. But when you look at some other countries, it's not a problem because they go about things, at least like even in a secular way, they go about things more in alignment with what God would have. And that's the thing. Like, if you're living by God's principles all the way through, there is still blessings tied to it. And our system, not only have they removed God, but now we're not even teaching by God's principles at all.
Right.
And so we are ranked 31st. The U.S. is ranked 31st among the nation's top countries as far as education goes. That's really, really bad.
Yeah. And I honestly think, I don't really think that was, at least from what I saw, it was the reason we even got a better ranking is because of our universities, because not all countries have them. But I found it super fascinating when we were looking into this a little bit before this conversation that there are some places like Finland that have a more, they call it holistic approach to education. So kids don't even start school in Finland until they're 7. For every 45 minutes of education, they have to have 15 minutes of like unstructured time. So like and it's expected that they go outside in any weather. Like, doesn't matter if it's raining, you get outside and you play and you take some time.
Right. Yeah.
And you can have the same teacher, which I found interesting, for up to 6 years, especially in the primary levels, so that teacher can become more like family. Learn how you learn, because not every child learns the same way. They understand that, and they want to have that type of relationship to foster and help that child learn.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I mean by God's principles, right? God expects us to be disciples over our kid. He expects us to understand the nature that he's given to them, the character and the individual gifts and talents that he's giving to them, and then nurture them in a specific way. Whereas so a place like Finland does that, even though God might not be the center of it, which is bad, but they're still aligning themselves more with God's principles. Whereas the American government education basically just treats every student exactly the same. You're all going to learn the same thing. You're all going to learn the same way. And if you don't, you have the problem. It's never the system that has a problem.
Right.
You have a problem.
Right. And they also eliminated standardized testing because they realized that it's a detriment to teach kids basically just to memorize answers for a test. But that's not really education.
Right.
They wanted it to be actual education and learning and enjoying to learn, and everyone learning differently. Some people are good at tests, some people aren't. They really wanted to meet the people where they were at and have a more natural approach to education, which is more in line with God's word.
Yeah, absolutely it is.
And I mean, Japan gets a little rigorous from what I can tell in the older age groups, but they don't even sit for formal exams or anything until 4th grade. Before then, they're learning like manners and how to, I read that they make meals for each other, they serve each other, they're learning to clean up, they're playing for educational things, but it's much more life skills based, empathy based, just how to be a person, build a foundation for how to take care of each other, how to take care of yourself, why we should care about ourselves, other people, and learning. So it sets them up for a great foundation for then when they are more.
Yeah, it's a focus
rigorous
on how you actually become an adult. Like, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? How do you interact with other people? Which, again, are principles that would align with God, even though they've removed God. Again, not the best system,
right,
but still a better system than what we have, because for the most part, we don't focus on relationships. We focus, like you said, we focus on memorization, regurgitation, and standardized tests.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see that in adult careers? Where do you need to memorize, regurgitate, and be tested on stuff without ever referencing anything?
Mm-hmm.
Like that doesn't exist anywhere other than our schools.
No.
Like, it doesn't make any sense at all. And you know, it's not just the school. Obviously, this is a demonic agenda, right? To come against families, and so our culture now, it's really, really hard to live off of one income. That's by design. Get the moms out of the homes so there's not even an option to allow the kids to be learning at home, where they have to go somewhere. They got to go somewhere because both of us got to leave and go make money to keep the lights on and keep food on the table. So where are they going to go? Oh, hey, listen, we got a solution for you. Why don't you bring them to our free school?
Right.
That's morally neutral, and whatever. So all of these systems work together. free public school, free daycare, super convenient. But obviously they don't say, oh, by the way, your kid's never going to learn who they actually were designed to be. Your kid's never going to learn what God actually wants them to do. It's on us as parents to understand God's plan and to say, wait, hold on. You're not providing actually the most important thing that my kid needs. Mm-hmm. If you sent your kid to school and they were like, hey, cool, bring them, it's free, super convenient. Only thing is they're never allowed to go to the bathroom. They're going to have to go to the bathroom in their pants. No one would ever send their kid to a school like that. No. Or they would at least stand up and fight and be like, listen, this is really important that my kid is allowed to go to the bathroom. So we're going to fight to make changes.
Right.
No one's fighting or no one did. I mean, we're like so far gone now, but generations past, no one stood up to fight to say, hold on, the most important thing in education is God. It has to be. Mm-hmm. God is the foundation of wisdom and knowledge and understanding. Mm-hmm. So it was just taken away from them. Mm-hmm. And so now God is not there and your kids are not going to learn the foundational, number one, most important thing for an education.
That's right.
And so that's why you have most kids, I didn't look up stats or statistics on this, but I can say it with a lot of confidence. Most kids graduate high school and have no idea who they are or what they want to do.
Yeah.
Or even just how to be an adult in the world.
No.
Right?
They don't even know how to ask questions.
Don't know how to ask questions. Don't know how to look people in the eyes. Don't know how to interact with other people.
No.
Some don't know how to shake a hand.
Yeah. No.
Some of them don't know how to go through a cash register.
Sorry,
Why?
I was just thinking, our kids have gone to Greystone. It's a nursing home, and they love going there, and they love the residents. But if you go to a nursing home, no one's going to fist bump you. Teach your kids how to shake a hand.
Yeah. On that topic, though, thank you for bringing a little bit of levity to this conversation. I'm sorry I get so intense, but it really is an intense point for me because I care about our kids. I care about your kids. I care about the world that our kids are going to be growing up in. And if something doesn't change, it's going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on that topic, what is the most embarrassing thing? Put this in the comments. What's the most embarrassing thing that you didn't know how to do when you moved out of the house, right? Like I had roommates that didn't know how to do laundry. I can't think. I wonder, I'll have to put in the comment. I'll have to think about this and put it in the comments. The most embarrassing thing. My parents did a really good job. Of preparing me. I feel like I was pretty good. But I remember looking at a lot of other kids going, you don't know how to put gas in your car? Like, how have you made it this far?
I did know
my dad always did it.
Yeah, I did know how to put gas in my car, but my dad did many things. My mom did many things. I remember when we lived together, I can't remember why I asked. It was either, like first of all, we lived in an apartment to start, and I did not know where the mailbox was. Zach asked me to get mail once months into us living together, and I was like, how? Where is that? What do I do? Also, the garbage. He was like, it was the same thing. Could you grab that? And I was like, and do what with it? And he was like, who do you think has been doing it? And I was like, I never thought about it. I don't know. Never crossed my mind.
Just grew legs and walked itself to the dumpster at the end of the parking lot.
And then I knew, and then I had to start doing things.
Yeah. So what's the most embarrassing thing that you didn't know how to do whenever you got to be an adult? But yeah, anyway, so as we're wrapping up, we've heard a couple common arguments presented for basically why people still feel the need, even after hearing most of our reasoning, why people still feel the need to put their kids into the government school system. Number one, my kid is called to be salt and light. As Christians, we're called to be salt and light. So if you remove all of the Christian kids from school, which is what I'm advocating for, take all the Christians out of public school. If you do that, though, then none of these other kids are ever going to hear the gospel. So I would challenge anybody that has that belief. Yes, our kids are meant to be salt and light, whenever they are mature enough to know how to go and do that.
Right.
So for sure, your third grader doesn't know how to be salt and light in an entirely dark, demonic atmosphere, right? They're going to get eaten.
Yeah, some stuff to work through, at the very least.
At the very least, right? Now, I've known one kid in his, I think it was his junior and senior year. He felt like God was calling him to be a missionary in his school.
In his town's public school.
Huh?
In his town's
public school, right? And he had what he felt like was a word from God, felt like he had it confirmed, had the support of his family, and he had an incredibly strong foundation. But he felt like he was supposed to be a missionary in school. Cool. He went and actually was a missionary. He was preaching the gospel. He prayed with all kinds of people, brought a bunch of them to Jesus, had them coming to youth group with him, was again praying with them, was having debates with his teachers about some of the things that they were teaching that did not line up with the Bible. Like he was being a missionary in his public school.
After being homeschooled and then went to a Christian school, right?
Right.
Okay.
And then after graduation, he went and now he's a missionary to the nations. So I absolutely believe that was part of God equipping him and preparing him for what he was actually getting called into doing. He was able to be a legitimate missionary while still going home every day. And then he got sent out to the nations.
Right.
Is that what your kid is doing as Salt and Light? Are they going in and having hard conversations with their peers, hard conversations, standing firm on the gospel and actually making a change?
Even conversations with teachers.
Or are they going in and being affected by the darkness that they're around? I just don't think that there's very many of those kids who are legitimately called by God to go be a missionary in the government school system.
Yeah. And then
and I would say that there's zero in elementary school.
Yeah. And then that's something that's a stumbling block that you're putting in front of them.
Right.
Expecting them to take on something so big that they don't have a foundation for.
Right. Again, you are sending them into a humanist church. That's what you're doing. And so if they are equipped and they know the environment that they're going into and they know the mission that they're on and they know what they're up against and how to defend against the attacks that absolutely 100% will come against them, and you're bringing them home and continuing to check in with them and have conversations and build them up and encourage them and work through with them how to be a missionary in that place because God has called them to it. Okay. There are some people out there that's their calling. Awesome.
For sure.
Praise God. And I pray that you sow all of the seed and see an incredible harvest in those places. But that is not very many people.
No.
And once again, it's not an elementary school.
No.
An elementary school kid is not equipped and prepared and mature enough to go and fight that battle all by themselves. And then so the other excuses kind of fall into two main categories, right? It's going to cost too much money to give them a Christian education. Again, convenience. Public school system is super convenient. It's free, convenient for all kinds of different reasons. It's just going to cost me too much to give them a Christian education, to put them in a private Christian school, right? Or it's going to cost me too much time to give them a Christian education at home. So it's going to cost me too much money, or it's going to cost me too much time to give them a Christian education. Here's the thing. No matter what education you give your kids, it's going to cost you something. Here's the challenge, I would say. If the true cost of a free education in the government school system is your child's identity in this life and maybe possibly their eternity in the next life, like, is that not worth your time and or your money?
Absolutely. I can't think of anything more worthy of our time and our money than trying to secure our kids' eternity in Christ.
No, I don't think God can either. So listen, we obviously feel very passionate about this. Once again, passionate about the next generation. We feel like that's where our calling is, to equip the next generation and even to hopefully equip other families, other parents to equip their next generation. And so we didn't have enough time to fit everything that we wanted to say about education in this conversation. This was tough. Like, we've walked through all of this. I remember whenever we were starting to learn all of this, our oldest was in preschool at the public school system. Thank God that we learned all of this early and started homeschooling after that. But in the next conversation, we want to talk about our homeschooling experience and private Christian education experience, and talk about all of the good things. I know a lot of this was negative, and it is. And I think it's valuable to talk about the negatives, but we also want to talk about how to do it the right way, and all of the fruit and blessings that we have experienced in homeschooling and in private Christian schooling as well.
Even at the older ages, even if you've got older kids and you watch this and you think, oh no, they've been in the system for however long, there are testimonies that we have received from Zach's Christian education experience now, from juniors, seniors. They radically transformed in a year or two, and it was amazing. It's been amazing. So don't feel hopeless. Yeah.
So if this was a little rough and you're like, man, I want to get my kids out of school, but what do I do? Make sure you come back for the next conversation. And obviously, you can add your comments, questions, whatever you might have to say to join this conversation. Again, we want people joining this conversation. So please like, subscribe, sign up for notifications, and put your comments in the comment section. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.